Hey, do you guys like to build MOCs? Because I really love to make my own creations. But what I've noticed is if I look back in time, some of my MOCs haven't aged very well with the skills that I've developed now. So this video is going to show how I took my very first MOC. This is one I built on Sutdio with the software, and it was the first actual custom building that went in my city. And how I was able to turn it from this into this. So I wanted to be able to show you that by doing these little tweaks, it will blow your build out of the water. And of course, I went over the top in some areas, and I'll show you kind of how and why I did that as well. Let's jump into how I got the build going. So the first thing was taking apart the old build. And I wanted to kind of look at how the walls, they were super smooth, and the pattern was too fixed. And then I had all these tiny windows, which when I went to light it up, just did not help the building pop at all. And the grounds were, well, kind of basic. And so I wanted to really make this part explode. I decided early on I wanted to make it a Mills plate, mostly so that it would be extra stable. I took this to a show and it was super flimsy and I had to rebuild a bunch of the grounds. So by going through and building this Mills plate out, I knew I could get more bang for my buck. And I took the base of the old temple because I wanted to keep the essence of the old building. I knew the new building probably wouldn't look the same, but I wanted to keep the same basic footprint and same basic color schemes. But when you do mills, you also have the opportunity to do things like have a basement or have a pond that actually goes down below the build line for the water. As I went to build the foundation, I knew I also wanted to have a more grand entrance. The old temple was just kind of a smooth walk-up entrance. But I wanted to also keep the doors. I wanted to keep that aesthetic of the door frame with the gold and the white. So I kept the doors, I just didn't break them. And I ended up building the front wall around those doors, just using a combination of the reds, and then I had a bunch of these brown textured bricks that came on the brick wall that helped me a lot with creating a little bit more aesthetic around the windows. And as you can tell, it's a whole lot of bricks snapping together. But overall, it came out really smooth. As you look at the terrain, I really wanted to make the gardens pop. So I did some raised planters and a lot of flowers, just a lot of color kind of all around it, with an inset there in the center for the reflecting pool. Even the walkways, I chose to use shield pieces instead of just flat pieces to give it a little bit more texture. Again, the whole goal was to make the whole terrain go above and beyond. And then I wanted to come up on the building and show that the bricks are actually very different. It's a combination of reds and browns, some printed bricks and some flat bricks. This is something I found really helps to break up a wall, but as you zoom out, it doesn't look as bad as you think it will when you're up close. I was really avoiding symmetry when I built this because I wanted it to look unique and different. But I wanted to keep the same door frame from my original temple. Again, I wanted throwbacks to the original build so that I will always remember that original design. In my original design, I wanted to have red to white, and it was like a very straight line, red to white. But I wanted it to really kind of bridge the difference. So that's where having the white brick and then kind of still adding some color to the second floor. I used some gray for accent, and then I wanted to have gold. And you'll see with the stained glass, I have a whole nother section here in a minute kind of showing how I did that. I wanted something to allow the light to come out. I carried this design of keeping a little bit of color all the way up to the top. And I wanted to keep this decorative design along the ridge from my original temple as part of that throwback. And that allowed me to tie all the way up into the tower, which the only thing I changed on the tower was running a wire with a light to be able to light the temple at the top. So I really wanted to get some stained glass in this build. And I watched some videos and kind of started playing around with it. But I realized all you really need for stained glass is something to hold the tiles in the front, and then building some sort of wall or support on the sides so that as I sat the cheese slopes in there, they had something to support them. It actually was a lot simpler than I thought it was conceptually. In reality, they were actually kind of difficult. You had to learn how to balance the colors and kind of play with the patterns. I ended up falling back on a very default pattern that would allow it to be clear and visible from a distance, but also something that was easy for me to rebuild. It was a whole lot of pinching and twisting to try and get them to match. But in the end, it actually came out really nice. Trying to get it mounted on the building was a whole nother story. You needed to put a piece of glass or something behind it, something that when I snapped it in, the tile wouldn't fall out the back. And after some practice, this is what I ended up coming out with. As you can see, I'd already done the larger stained glass window, but together these three windows became the foundation of the second floor. And the way I did the large stained glass was very simple. I built it against a window piece with the two sidewalls, and then just snapped it behind a piece of glass on the wall. This really worked because I was using the walls to kind of inset the build, so the windows had a feeling of being recessed, which really went with the design I was going for on the floor. And then, you have to secure everything as tight as you can. As I built each phase, I would stack the remainder part of the old temple on top just to see how it looks. And with the light, you can see how different lighting up the first two floors looked versus that old second floor. As you can see, I knew I was on the right track, so I decided to redo the next floor, but I wanted this to have a lot more brick use and kind of a better shape. So notice how I brought the light up between the two walls. I actually offset the whole inner wall by a half stud using the centering bricks that have one stud in the middle. So that way you can see the light coming up on the edges and really help that floor to have an accent, even though I wanted this floor to be basically a white wall across the front. This really helped me tie in the stained glass floor with the upper floors. I wanted these upper levels to be a lot more pronounced. I didn't want it to be plain white like the old temple. And so I put a lot of texture into it. I took out the corner and put in some rounded studs. I made these pillars using a lot of snot techniques. And I added a little bit of stained glass with some traditional windows. Really, my goal was to have the upper part just really kind of pop out in the city. When it was all done, I finally got all the lights just right to where it had enough accents that the lights weren't overpowering, and I was able to find the right type of light that wouldn't bleed through the bricks so bad as to make them glow. And this allowed me to get what I felt like was a great finished product. So as you can see, it really pops in the city. And that's really what my goal here was. The ability to create something that becomes an icon in the city. That as you zoom back away from the building, and you look at it from all the way back at the opposite end of the table, you can see it instantly and know what it is. As much as I really like the Daily Bugle and some of the other Lego made sets, I really want this city to be full of my creations because it's my city. It's not a city that some Lego designer came up with. That's why my plan is to slowly go through each of the buildings and put my personal touch, or maybe just add some lights, and really bring some of my older builds up to par. My next one is the fire station here, which, as you can tell, the fire station has a real basic, kind of a classic Lego look to it. I modified the original little Lego fire station that we got, but the back, just kind of a mess, allowing me to get in and put fire trucks in. But my goal is to take this over to the table and start bringing this one the same kind of touch I did to the temple. So if you've enjoyed this video, I would love for you to subscribe and come join me on my MOC journeys. Thank you and have a great one.